pals! Welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast! Here we go!
Hello and welcome to Mouse Bytes, the show all about Disney video games, past and present. This is episode 29. I'm your host Clay, and today I'm joined by my co-host Jeph. Hello, Jeph.
Hello, Clay. How you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
Most excellent here.
Awesome. Hey, Jeph, have you seen any Disney movies recently?
You know, I haven't, but I know.
Womp womp.
I know. But there's one that I've been really wanting to go see.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Well, it's something about a big cat.
Yes, that is coming out. When is that coming out? Is that coming out soon?
I'm not sure. I think it's soon.
I think it's. I don't think it's this month. I think it's next month. Because I think they got Spider-Man in July. Maybe it is July. I think it is July or August. Anyway, I did just see the Aladdin remake.
Oh yeah, I did see that a couple weeks ago.
There you go. Jeez, yeah. I tried to throw you a nice easy hit, and you let it
did.
drop.
It's funny because I enjoyed the movie a lot, but I've already completely forgotten about it, which is awful.
Well, I think that the next one's gonna make a lot of people forget about Aladdin.
Yeah, probably.
But I did wake up, I think it was Friday morning, and I had an Aladdin song stuck in my head from the new movie, and so on my drive to work, I put it on Spotify, and I was like, it's not terrible. I could spend a whole episode here talking about my thoughts on that movie.
Yeah, I could too.
The good and the bad, but that's not what we're here for.
No.
I did see Toy Story 4 the other day.
Nice.
But we're also not here to talk about that.
Dang it.
So I better not
Crushing
get going.
my dreams.
I know. We need just a show to talk about all this stuff, but we're not. Today we're going to talk about a game. One of the reasons I decided that we needed to make a podcast about Disney video games, because I would argue that this game is, for better or worse, a staple of Disney video games. And I think everybody would
I would agree with that. Yeah. Totally.
Okay. So today, after a long, long wait, we are going to be taking a look at The Lion King. Awesome. That is some good Lion King music.
Man, I love the soundtrack of this game.
Yeah, it's so flipping good. And I can't wait to talk more about that. So to start us off, if for some reason the listeners at home don't know what we're talking about, let's give them a refresher, maybe a very vague, overall kind of explanation as what this game is, and then we'll talk about some of the information about the game. Jeph, why don't you fill us in?
Okay. So, what the heck is The Lion King? It is a mostly 2D platformer game. It's got some light maze elements. I don't think you'd really call them puzzles. And then a few run towards the camera. I'm noticing a trend with these games. I run towards the camera section, and I can't remember if there's anything else. That's pretty much it, right?
It's pretty much an all-American platformer.
That's right. For the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo. It was developed by Westwood Studios of Command & Conquer fame and Disney Software, before I guess they were called Disney Interactive. It came out on the Super Nintendo in October of 1994 here in the States, December of that year over in Europe. And the Genesis, it launched both in North America and Europe on December 8th as well. So the Super Nintendo version, I guess, was the one that got finished first. There were other versions, amazingly enough, including the NES, which I really need to track down because I'd love to see what it looks like. The Game Boy Windows, didn't know that either. The Amiga, the Game Gear, and Master System. That makes sense. Yeah, so that's a little bit about this game.
Yeah, I have it for the Game Gear.
Yeah. Is it the same game or is it different?
It's the same, but it's different.
Okay, that's pretty typical of the old mobile games.
Right. Yeah. A lot of it's the same, but like the Stampede, obviously they had to change, and so they basically turned the Stampede into a side scroller of sorts.
That works.
But really, I think it was more small changes like that. So for the most part, it's pretty similar. But yeah, I don't know. They definitely made a lot of different versions of this, but at least we didn't get it like an Aladdin thing where they let two different studios do it.
Right.
And then there was a lot of arguing about which Aladdin was better. I mean, people still argue about which Lion King was better, Genesis or Super Nintendo. But at least it's, in all intents and purposes, the same game, just with differences based on, the hardware.
Right,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, other than that, I can't really speak. I might have played the Game Boy one, but yeah, and the NES one I'm not very familiar with, which makes me wonder if it was more a like an out of US release kind of thing.
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
Because they've done that like with some other games. Like I think Beauty and the Beast was one that they released for the NES, but not in America. So like stuff like that, maybe. I don't know. So I can't really speak for a lot of those, but I have played the Game Gear one, and I've played, I think, the Game Boy one. So
nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So from there, we'll go into our history with the game. I guess you sort of started on that. And
I didn't.
Well,
not really.
Okay, you have played the Game Boy one, so there's a little history. No,
true.
So with that, I wasn't taking a shot, I swear.
No, you're good. You're good.
So okay, as far as my own history with this game, I first read about it in an issue of Disney Adventures magazine, which we used to get when I was a kid, and I just remember reading about it and wanting it so bad, and then I never got it. I think it's more that I just never asked for it. I probably should have. I don't know why I didn't. It was just one of those where it's like, oh, I read about it. That must mean my mom knows I want it. Like, I don't know, child logic. I was like 8. But so I didn't really get to play it as a kid. My first experience with it was unfortunately, it's probably on an emulator in the mid 2000s, if I'm being honest. And I always really enjoyed it, but I never played all the way through it either. It was just one of those where it's like, let's fire it up, let's listen to the title screen and play the first level and then move on to something else. So that's pretty much the extent of my experience with it prior to this episode. What about yourself, other than playing on the Game Boy?
You just sent me down a huge rabbit hole where I'm now scrolling through different images of Disney Adventure magazines.
Oh man, I love that magazine.
Dude, I totally forgot about this.
Really? Oh.
But I used to have some of these.
Yeah, we had everyone from like 92 to 97 or 98.
I'm going to have to look on eBay and see if I can get a couple of these, because man, these things are relics. Yeah. It's like every cover has like some kind of like 90s like Hollywood star and then another character
like a Disney
thrown
character.
on.
Yeah.
Right, like here's like young Neil Patrick Harris. There's one here with Macaulay Culkin, and then behind him is Ursula from Little Mermaid.
Nice. Yeah, I think the first one was like Rick Moranis and Baloo or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
And then here's one with Michael Jackson and Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Wow.
Man, there's some iconic ones. I feel like there might have been a Robin Williams one, but I might not be remembering that right.
There is a Robin Williams one, and it talks about how he's returning to Genie.
Okay.
So I would imagine that was for the third one.
Yep.
Yeah,
cool.
Man, I had some of these. I'll have to see if I can find some of these, because these are cool.
They're great. It's funny, like they used to highlight the Disney video games fairly frequently in those, and I remember one time, I don't know if it was an interview or if it was literally just a piece on game development, but it was explaining how video games were made. and talking about like how they create the backgrounds and scanning in and doing animation. It was sort of my first window into game development, and it made me really want to become a game developer. So it's kind of cool to tie it back to that magazine. I could talk about that magazine for a long time.
No, that's awesome. I'm going to keep this tab open and come back to this later.
Excellent.
My history with this game, yes, quite a bit. As I mentioned on the show before, my grandma had a Sega Genesis. We never owned one. We were a Nintendo family, and so anytime we'd go over to my grandma's, we'd get to play Sega Genesis, and Lion King, along with Aladdin, were a few of the games that were available. So we played them quite a bit. And Lion King, I think I might have actually played this one maybe even more than Aladdin, but mostly because I think it was just so darn difficult that we kept pushing ourselves to try to get further. And to the best of my memory, we could never get past the Stampede of all things. Which now I don't feel like is as difficult. But I think when we were kids, I think just even getting to that point, I think we exhausted a lot of our lives and our continues. Because I remember just even getting stuck on the obvious, level 2, doing the little double jump on the ostrich. I just could never
That's always
get
where
that.
I would end too. That's so funny.
And even now, it just still doesn't feel natural because I think you have to wait till like the last second to go, and you kind of, I don't know, maybe it's like the Donkey Kong Country in me that just wants to jump sooner. But so it was always a difficult game, but regardless, I still regard it. There's a lot of regards in there. Just as one of my favorites. Very nostalgic. The music, everything about it, I still really love it, and it reminds me of my childhood. And I just remember me and my brothers and my cousins just trying really hard to best the game, and we would even if you threw it on easy, it still was just like so difficult. And so it was one of those games that it never really left my memories. And so when I did eventually out of college and on my own, I started buying retro stuff. Lion King and Aladdin were two of the first games that I was like, I gotta have these. Nice. And so picking those back up just was awesome. And now I've got a copy physical of the Game Gear and the Genesis versions on my shelf, and I'm like super proud of them. But this game is still a son of a gun, don't get me wrong. But regardless, I still really love it, and totally takes me back to my childhood. So I'm a little more impartial to the Genesis version because that's obviously the one I played. I'm not necessarily saying it's better than the Super Nintendo one, but I'd much rather listen to the music from the Sega one because that's the version I know, and I think it's better.
Okay, that makes sense. No, it was interesting. I was going to ask you that later on, but it's so interesting because I prefer the Super Nintendo one, having played both and not having one or the other more dominant in my nostalgia bank. Right. And so it's just like I love the instrumentation of the Super Nintendo one better. I feel like it's, I don't know how to describe it, like gentler on the ears. I feel like I don't like the Sega sound chip that much, and I know some people just absolutely love it, and that's totally fine. But I just always prefer, in general, Super Nintendo soundtracks over the Sega ones.
I agree that the Super Nintendo has a better, I think, sound. I think it's just got better sounds, different sound chips and stuff that overall I think it can make for a more impressive musical whatever. But I don't know, but I think sometimes there's things that the Genesis does better, or it's just kind of unique in that way where when I hear something that's from a Genesis, like even if I don't know what the game is, I can usually be like, oh, that's definitely the Genesis.
Definitely, yeah.
So it's very unique in that way. And so I agree, sometimes it's like a little extra tinty or like a little buzzy and stuff. But really we're getting ahead here, but the only thing that I think the Super Nintendo one does better is at the very beginning, they actually have what sounds like people singing that. Yeah. Like other than that, I don't really think there's a whole lot it does better. But but it's literally, I think, just the fact that in my head, like that's the only way it should sound other than the original song. And so when I hear it on Super Nintendo, I'm like, that's weird. But that's just it's just the way it's ingrained in my head. So
that might be part of why I like the Super Nintendo better, is that I don't know what the limitations on the Genesis were, but like the Super Nintendo in general had programmable MIDIs, and you could always tell the games that used the default ones versus the ones that used like custom ones, like the best example being the Donkey Kong Country series. But this one heavily modified the default sounds, and like you said, had an actual vocal chant for that part, and it was really impactful. Like, so anyway, the graphics, obviously the Super Nintendo can display more colors, so you have less of the dithering effect on the graphics. So that, anyway, we'll get into that when we get to that part. But nostalgic wise, I know. The last thing, the whole reason I brought up Disney Adventures is there was a part where they talked about an Easter egg in the final boss with the lightning strikes in the background being Disney characters. As far as I know, and I don't have this pulled up right now, but I think that's only in the Genesis version for whatever reason. So I was super excited about that too, and that made me want the game because they apparently Disney characters flashing the lightning for one frame. But anyway, let's take a quick break, and then we will get into the gameplay discussion. Man, this music is so good. So we're back with the gameplay discussion. As we always do, we'll discuss the visuals, the audio, gameplay and difficulty, the story, if there is one, which this one is based on a movie, so yes, and we'll go through the levels. So starting with the visuals, this is a great looking game all around.
Yes. As
I started to allude to, the Super Nintendo version has a bigger color palette. That's just the way the Super Nintendo is. It's not, not that the Sega Genesis version or Mega Drive version looks bad, because it's gorgeous too, but everything, I really like. Each environment looks different. There's bright ones, there's dark ones, the elephant graveyard, the lava, but then also the jungle and Hakuna Matata waterfalls. There's just good backgrounds, good variety, great color palette usage, and I think above everything else, the animation in this game is just like stunning.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's done by Disney Animation Studios. They credit that in the beginning, which Mickey Mania we touched on, also by this same developer. No, that was Traveler's Tales.
Is Aladdin?
Aladdin, yep, Aladdin.
Yeah,
that's what it was. The which version? The Genesis version, right?
Yes.
From the same studio, and had Disney Feature Animation do a lot of the animations, and it's just night and day better than some of the other stuff, and it's just like, holy cow. I think maybe the most impressive thing to me is the amount of frames per animation, because it looks so much smoother, and this is the same again for Aladdin on the Genesis versus the Super Nintendo, where you see Capcom was used to doing limited frames, probably for gameplay's sake, but Westwood, when they got these fully, I don't know if they're 30 or 60 frames of animation, definitely runs at 60 frames. It might just be 30 doubled up, but regardless, it's smooth as butter and looks good. It's got sort of the, I forget the term for fast motion, where you kind of do motion blur through animation, where you...
Right.
I'm losing my train of thought here, but looks really good.
Yeah.
That was a whole lot of verbal about...
Well said.
Yes.
Well said.
So go ahead, what are your thoughts on the visuals, Clay? Save me.
Let's see, what do I think? I don't think that I watched a comparison video of the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis one. I don't have a lot of thoughts on it. There are some little differences here and there. The only thing I noticed, and it is very apparent in level 2, is I felt like the Super Nintendo one, like the backgrounds looked really washed out, whereas the Sega Genesis one looked like a lot warmer, and especially like the backgrounds and stuff that are really cool in that level.
Yeah.
Just really popped in the Sega one, but for some reason, and maybe it was the video that did the comparison, but it was not as colorful, and it just seemed a little washed out and not, I don't know, not as dark, not as many hues, I think is the correct term. So that was kind of weird, but other than that, like Jeph said, the backgrounds are amazing in this game. I forget the terminology, but they did certain things on some of the levels where the speed
Parallaxing,
yes, the parallaxing, where the speed of the character isn't necessarily the same speed as the background, which is created to show depth or perspective or whatever. Totally. And so and in some of the levels there's even like a middle ground that is going opposite of it, which is kind of cool. I don't know if that's every level or just some, but so I like that. Like Jeph said, the animations are great. Little things like when you kill the hyenas, they kind of do a salute and then they kind of pass out, like
their tongue
little
out.
their tongues out, and just little things like that where it just makes a whole, like they could have just gone up in a poof of smoke or just disappeared, but they spent the time and they really made it look really good, which is awesome. Idle animations are great. Simba's got some different things that he does if you sit still. The rhinos in the second level are like chomping on grass or something while they're sitting there, and stuff like that were just really neat. Good enemy design for the most part. I think that most of the characters that even aren't necessarily in the movie still, feel like they're from the movie, which is because I think all the enemy characters were created by Disney, and so anything that was given to them was, came from the people that made the movie. So even things like the vultures in the third level, just they don't feel super out of place. Maybe some of the other enemies maybe feel a little more out of place at times, or like a little forced, but for the most part I felt like they all kind of felt like they came from the same universe or story or whatever.
Totally.
The Stampede level is a very good looking level. Maybe hasn't aged as well, doesn't look as good maybe now on like upgraded TVs and stuff, but back in the day it was really impressive. The fact that the wildebeests like start out kind of small and they get bigger, it's a cool perspective. So I like that. They have little cut scenes in between where you get a little bit of some dialogue, and I think that the visuals on those are really cool. Like they did one with Scar where he tells the hyenas to kill him, and he's all silhouette, and I think that they did some really cool things with that, just kind of foreboding and kind of spooky, and so I appreciated that. I don't know, I could keep talking visuals on this one for a while because there's just so much good looking stuff, and I guess the final thing I'll say on this is a lot of good color schemes for levels, and so even though certain levels are using similar stuff, like there's one level after Simba runs away with all the thorns and stuff, it's literally pretty much the same level or same like stuff as level 1, but you have this beautiful sunset in the background and these thorns and stuff, so it helps it feel different enough that you're not like, oh, this is just the other level over again,
right? And
then you mentioned Hakuna Matata is just a freaking gorgeous level. The backgrounds on that are stunning, and the green colors and stuff in the ground you're playing on is really good too. So each level just really kind of has a unique theme to it as far as the colors and stuff, and so I think that really works well for it.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. So I'm trying to think if there's any other graphical things. Like I'm kind of right now I've got the Genesis and the Super Nintendo versions pulled up to see what you were talking about with the color palette and the being washed out. I totally see what you're talking about, where some of them, it's like the darks aren't as dark, and that makes it look, like you said, washed out. Which is unfortunate, but then it's like that first level you play as adult Simba, where it's like in the jungle but the dark, looks almost identical on both systems, which again it's a testament to the studio making the Genesis's limited color palette look really good.
Interesting.
So, anyway, little things like that. But in general, they did a really good job.
One other thing, I guess I'll throw it to you. What are your thoughts on the I guess for lack of a better term, the heads up display, health,
Yeah.
the roaring and that kind of thing. What do you think of those?
They're fine, and I'm sure if you have the instruction booklet, they make sense, but like out of context when you're just picking up this game and playing it, especially in a modern era where you get a used copy or use other means, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Nope.
They're just these yellow and red stripes. One's got yellow zigzags and red horizontal stripes, and then the other one is the opposite. And those are the top left and top right of your screen. And the context of them, one I think is your health bar, kind of.
Yes.
And then the other one is like if you pick up bugs or defeat enemies, it's like your power meter for your roar, but I don't really know what the roar does. And it's odd. Again, if you have the instruction booklet, I'm sure it explains what it is, and then it makes sense. But not
the other
not
thing
the
that's
best.
confusing. Sorry to
No,
interrupt
go.
you. Is if you get hit by an enemy, you lose your roar power.
Yeah.
And so
it's like
so
a
that
hit
kind of makes
point.
you think it's your health too.
Yeah. No,
And so
you're
that
right.
just makes it even more confusing.
And then, for whatever reason, they've got a gigantic picture of Simba and a gigantic number in the lower left corner for your lives, which I don't know. It's like, it's not the worst thing ever. It just seems unnecessary. It just seems too big. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree though. It's too confusing. I appreciate that they didn't like make some big ugly health bar and like they're pretty minimal and
Yeah.
I guess you could argue that they kind of have like a African vibe going on maybe with them,
Yeah,
but
like a tribal.
but yeah, there's got to be a better way to kind of explain. And like you said, the manual helps these things, but a lot of kids don't even get this game with the manual. They're buying
True.
secondhand and
Yeah.
they don't even have it, which is another thing we could mention when we talk about the controls. There's some things in there too
Yeah,
that you need kind of the manual to understand.
totally. So it's an unfortunate side effect there with the visuals, and the UI. But
All right, screw it. So I'm going to bring up another thing since even though we're not at this point. Level 2 of this game is Can't Wait to Be King.
yeah.
And literally you start the level and the first thing you see is instructions. And it says
Roar at monkeys.
roar at monkeys.
Yeah.
And you're like and then it goes I can't wait to be king. You're like, okay. So I don't know. I never heard if there was a reason behind that, because literally throughout the rest of the game there are no explanations.
Right.
But for this one they did, which I might have to do with the fact that they added the monkey stuff later on, and we'll talk about all this. But I don't know. So it's just like sometimes it held your hand, but then the rest of the time it didn't, and so there's a lot of like I felt like they were trying to let you figure stuff out on your own, but then they randomly threw stuff at you, and so I don't know. It's kind of a confusing mess at times.
That
but
one sounds like it was the result of like focus testing and people just completely not getting past that part would be my guess.
Right. But then why couldn't they have waited like until you got to the monkeys to like throw that part up? But
right,
like
yeah.
when you throw at the beginning of the level,
right
I'm
context.
already forgetting that it's already there, or I wasn't even reading it. I'm just
right,
playing the game.
and there's no context to it there, so it's like, what? Yeah,
yeah,
you're totally
exactly.
right.
Yeah, random thought. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just
No.
talking about manuals, so I figured.
No,
mention
that's good, and it is part of the visuals.
Yes, visuals.
Yes.
Yeah.
It displays in a nice, pleasant African font. I don't
Yes.
think it's an African font.
Uh,
But anyway, yeah. I think I accidentally took over hosting from you, but
oh yeah, it's
I think
me.
we swapped that.
I think I've just kind of been sitting back, letting you run the conversation. All right, let's talk about visuals. No, let's talk about audio.
Okay.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. Jeff, you got any thoughts on the audio, be it the music or sound effects or voiceover stuff, any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already implied that we really like the music for this, both on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. And we've
Yes.
already talked about that there is differences in the MIDI samples or whatever you want to call them, however they did it. But it's great. It's faithful remixes of the movie music for the most part, if not entirely. I don't know that there's any original music.
There is not.
Okay, great. Which I love. I think that's what they should do with licensed games. But
Yes.
whatever. So some really nice mixes, and there's one that really stood out to me today as I was kind of playing through the game. That the first level has one of the Hans Zimmer songs. So the music is like in the movie. There's a split between Elton John, Tim Rice music for the musicals that are sung, and then Hans Zimmer does the score. And Hans Zimmer's pretty well-known composer. He's done like Gladiator, but also like Modern Warfare 2. So, but he did the Lion King's score. So anyway, the first level starts with the Hans Zimmer. I don't know what you'd call this song, but it's the one that goes dun 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 dun.
Yes.
And I think it's just a beautiful song, and it's a really good one to start with, even though it is not really played in the beginning of the movie, which is totally fine.
And it's like way more serious when it's used in the movie.
Right, exactly. It's really towards the end. But it's cool that it starts with that, and then when you become adult Simba for the first time, there's like a different mix of it, which I thought was just a really nice touch, kind of mirroring being Simba, little Simba, and being grown-up Simba. I don't know. One thing I just wanted to call out. The voice clips are really cool. Like you mentioned, there's ones in between levels, or like every time you start a level, Timon does a little animation, goes, "It starts," from the movie, and it's like the real voice clips from the movie. On old hardware like this, that wasn't super duper common. It wasn't like uncommon, but it was nice. It was cool that they dedicated the cartridge space to it.
Yeah, I agree.
And it doesn't sound awful. It doesn't sound great, but it doesn't sound awful. Especially for other games of this era. I know there's some that just have some garbled messes of voice acting.
Yeah.
And the sound effects are all good. Simba's little roar is cute.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
The Super Nintendo one is stupid, and the Sega one is good.
Oh, no, I need to go listen to that.
Yes, because the Super Nintendo one is like, meow.
Yeah.
It's literally a cat, and then in the Sega one, it's like,
oh, interesting.
It actually kind of sounds like he's trying, I don't know. Going from the Sega one to the Super Nintendo one, you're like, that's dumb.
Oh.
Because it's like kind of slapsticky and cartoony. I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to step on your toes.
No, you're good. It's interesting to hear that perspective, because it's like I've only played the Super Nintendo one. I think I've just seen like the title screen of the Sega one when playing. But no, I for me it reminded me of that part in the movie when Scar puts him in the middle of the gorge and like tells him to practice his roar, or says work on your little roar, and he like is roaring at this little lizard or whatever, and it's just like so pitiful, and it's like Wah! So it reminded me of that, and so I think that's why I liked it. But it's interesting if you got it in what you're used to on the Genesis one. So is it a sound effect, or is it still like a I don't know, like an audio sample on the Genesis?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't. I'm not sure if it's a sound effect or if it's I think it's a sound effect and not a sound sample. If I had to guess.
Yeah, probably.
But
interesting.
Yeah.
So,
but there's very few differences in the sound effects between the two games. I think that's the one that was most obvious to me.
Okay.
When watching like some comparison, I think there's some more. Like I think Simba says "cool." I don't know if he does that. Does he do that with bugs or with extra lives, or is it both?
Might be both. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Because I think maybe in the Sega one it's only for like the health or the level up stuff or like the extra continuos. But when he gets bugs, it doesn't say cool. I don't know. I could be wrong, but he does do that sometimes. So I guess that's cool.
It might have been harder again because the audio hardware on the Genesis is a little weaker, so it might have been harder to load voice samples during gameplay when you've got so much other stuff in memory. Whereas on those like in between scenes. I don't know.
Which I know he says cool. I just don't remember what things. But I think I remember when I watched Super Nintendo gameplay, I was like, I don't remember him saying cool that much.
Yeah, he says it a lot. Super
right.
Nintendo one. Cool.
Yeah. But
okay. Any other? Well, you're hosting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other sound effects that were neat or unique, I guess. There's some cool later sound effects with the when he's grown up Simba with growling and stuff. I think that those all
Yeah.
sound really good and line up well. So no, I think you kind of hit on everything. The music is super good. It's really great. I think they did a tremendous job at it, and really did great with the source material. In fact, I heard through some of the developers that Hans Zimmer, him and his people reached out to the guy who did the music for this game and told him how much they enjoyed his adaptations of
awesome.
Hans Zimmer stuff. Yeah. So they got the thumbs up from him, which I think is saying a lot. So I think that's pretty neat, and I think it's totally deserving because I don't know. Before even like getting into the gameplay, just hearing the music on the home screen is it kind of takes me back pretty quickly. So great on that. I like the sound clips they did add from the movies and stuff. There's even like ones that you're not as like you won't find as easily. Like if you do really well in the Timon and Pumbaa mini games, you can get Timon to say, "I ate like a pig," and so there's like some kind of little hidden ones in there that aren't as common. And so I think think it's kind of cool. Yeah. And the fact that they can literally do a cutscene with like one line between each level, where it's just like kill him, and that's it. Like that's all the exposition we're getting or whatever. It's like they didn't spend a lot of time like giving us dialogue bubbles with story
with
filler,
superfluous. Like
they just they show you a little bit and then they move you on to the next thing, and you just kind of roll with it, and it works.
Totally.
So
keeps the pace good too.
Yeah. I think that's about it for audio. You good?
Yep, that's pretty good. Sound effects are
all
good.
right. Yeah. Cool. Gameplay and difficulty. So let's go ahead and get difficulty out of the way, and then we'll hit on some gameplay features and things. Difficulty. The game does have easy, normal, and hard. I think there's 3 different ones. The change in difficulty determines how much health or how many lives you have, and then I think it also determines how common power-ups or items that you can collect are, as well as how many times you have to hit a bad guy. So like hyenas on easy, I think you only got to hit them once, but on the other difficulties it's more. So I'm man enough to admit that I never play out this game on anything other than easy. Thankfully the developers didn't limit the game on easy. They didn't take any levels out, so you can play through the entire game. I think there might be like some hidden areas that I heard someone say you couldn't get to on the lower difficulty, but you pretty much get the full experience regardless. And let's be honest, even on its easiest difficulty, this is a challenging game. In fact, this is this is where the term that I've coined, blockbuster brutal, comes from. Yeah. Jeph, would you like to explain that to the listeners, where that all comes from?
Yeah, we'll revisit that. We learned about this, I think, through this interview that the original creative director of the game did with Double Fine, and we kind of just watched that again today, but it's something we'd seen before, where, and I know we've touched on this in past episodes, but just in case you're not familiar, the time when this game came out, the mid-90s, game rentals was really starting to take off, and developers were realizing that people weren't buying their games as much, and at the time, there wasn't really anything they could do about it because, Blockbuster or whoever would buy one copy of the game, everybody else would rent it, and then everybody loves the game, but it didn't sell well. So to try and counter that, they came up with this idea of make the first level fun, easy, enjoyable, kind of a sample of what the game is, and then make like the second or third level just brutally, unforgivingly hard, or challenging, or make a hard puzzle or a difficult platforming section or whatever. And so that this one, it's the just can't wait to be king, is just brutally difficult because they didn't want people beating it if they rented it. They wanted them to go buy it, essentially.
Right.
Which I don't know how that didn't still result in people just renting it longer, but, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like a free sample to get you to go buy it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting that they tried to combat this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it necessarily was to its benefit. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like they could have made the difficulty slider. The fact that there is an easy, medium, hard, like they could have totally made easy a lot easier. They could have taken out the insta kill giant boulders that come chasing after you, or the ridiculous amount of enemy placement in some of the levels that just make it stinking difficult. The monkey puzzle on level 2, I think, is what they've specifically said was something they added later on to kind of slow people down. Which I just don't know if that's good game design.
Right.
Like, add a thing that like slows people's progress, and I don't know. Once you figure it out, though, it's not terribly difficult to do, and if you're following like a walkthrough or something, it's not too bad. But in some of the later levels, it feels just really unfair. In fact, Simba's Exile, I think, is the one where they introduce, if you stay in the same spot for too long, a random rock will spawn and drop on your head and hurt you. Jeez. And so you just have to, constantly kind of not be in the same spot. And that's kind of like, I don't know. So I did hear from an interview with one of the developers that they do purposely alternate the difficulty between each level.
Okay. That makes sense.
And so they would do a difficult level, and then there would be like the easy level. And so in certain parts you can kind of see that. I mean, it's all still pretty challenging and difficult, but definitely some of the levels are kind of a step down in difficulty, I would say, which was interesting. They purposely were trying to give the player a break.
Yeah.
Whether or not they actually did a good job of that, I don't know, but that was their intention going in. So yeah, I don't know. I think for the most part, though, it's just enemy placement. Like, there's just certain parts where they just throw, you're trying to climb up a ledge and there's a monkey there throwing nuts at you. And it's like, how am I supposed to get up here without this thing just barraging me with these tiny projectiles that I can't dodge?
Right.
And so, and then the insta kill thing that I talked about, and I know, we've talked about it too, is certain parts you just fall in a pit and you're immediately dead, or a boulder hits you and you're dead. And so, I don't know. I beat the entire game today playing through it before we recorded this, but there's no way I would have gotten through it if I didn't put on a cheat so that I had infinite health.
Right.
And I even had to use like some save states to get through it. But I don't know. It's one of those games you have to play many times over to memorize and get a hold of it and like get a hang of how to do things, I think, before you would be able to get through it. But I've also watched people play through it like online, and they're just kind of casually talking and playing through it, and they get through it without having to even use one of their continues. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's a pretty steep difficulty, I would say. In certain parts more than others. The part I had the most difficulty with was the waterfall part in Hakuna Matata.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate that part so much.
One slip up and you're just back at the bottom. And
yeah, it's just so frustrating. It's like, yeah, in the grand scheme, it's not like the hardest thing in all of video game history by any means.
Right.
But yeah, it's just very frustrating. But after, I think, 17 minutes of trying to get through it, I finally figured it out. And by figured it out, I mean got to the top.
Yeah.
But I think what I was doing was I was just getting impatient and thinking that I was losing a lot of progress instead of just waiting for the right thing. And so I would jump early thinking that I was like wasting too much time. But if you stand on the slow logs, it's not terrible. But I don't know. I could just still argue that that's not very good game design to have these vertical logs instead of horizontal logs that you jump to and from as they move down. I don't know. It's just like... But then I watch people do it on like speed runs and stuff, and they do it like so quick, and I'm just like, oh, okay, apparently it's not that hard. But
Yep.
yeah. So I don't know. I think this game's a lot more fun if you use some cheat codes, and just you don't have to worry about necessarily losing your health and dying. But
Agreed.
that's just my opinion.
Yeah. There's a few, also just really quick, there's a few enemies later on, like the hyenas and the jaguars, that felt a little cheap, where it was like if you were too close to them when you started your attack pattern, they will always get a hit on you. Like,
Right.
that's annoying to me because it's not about skill. You get locked into the swipe animation or whatever, and then they will always hit you. And it's like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
So there's a few things like that, but in general, it's not awful. It's just you've got to be way more careful than you really, I feel like you need to be, because you're like swipe, swipe, swipe. You should just be dominating, like just killing them, and they still are getting hits in on you. And to me, in any game, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is cheap hits like that.
Yeah. Jeph, let me ask you a question. What are your thoughts on kind of moving into gameplay here? What are your thoughts on the physics and the controls of this game? Platforming with a lion and all this stuff. Like, what do you think of how they handled it? Do you think it worked well? Was there certain things that worked better than other things? What are your thoughts?
Overall, I like it. I feel like the weight and floatiness of the jumps and all that feels good. Few things that just bothered me is sometimes the animations interfered, mostly with, more than anything, the ledge grabbing is what bothers me in this game. The hitbox of the ledge and the hitbox of the character to grab the ledge sometimes just doesn't feel quite right, or you'll miss something that you like, man, I thought I was lined up perfectly. And then other times where it's like there's a few vertical things where you're jumping like ledge to ledge to ledge, left and right, and like the animation throws Simba's like paws way over past where they should be, and then they suddenly grip on, and it looks kind of weird to me. But no, overall the gameplay doesn't bother me. I thought it was good.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I guess there's like a little bit of a momentum thing that threw me off.
Okay.
If you jump without kind of getting a proper running start, you really don't cover as much ground.
You're right. Yeah, that does suck.
And so that's kind of weird. Like if you just jump standing still, you don't, I feel like you don't have all of it. And I think that was intentional. I think that's the way they wanted to do it. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, or it's just not my preference, but they did that. And then the some of the hanging, swinging stuff was just way too specific.
Right.
And like, is that what you were talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
There's
like the
some
tails
ledges,
on,
yeah,
like the little tails on the hippos or whatever on Hakuna Matata, or no, Can't Wait to Be King. Like if you just barely aren't like exactly where that is, you don't get it.
Right.
And
yeah, the one
I read
I was specifically thinking of is on Hakuna Matata, the waterfall one, where it was like there's a part where you have to kind of go up a slope over the rocks above it, and there's like, I don't know, like 8 or 9 of them, and it's just so easy to miss them, and then it's super slow to take you back down to the bottom and try again.
Yeah, so that gets a little frustrating, and the swinging thing to thing, I don't know if that mechanic worked great to begin with, but when I watch people who know what they're doing play the game, they don't even go through like a full swing. Yeah. They just kind of fire off really quickly, and it seems to work really well for them. So I don't know if there's like some kind of hidden trick to it, but so there's that. Another thing to mention with the gameplay, obviously there's 2 parts to this game. There's young Simba and grown-up Simba, and they have different move sets. Young Simba can roll, which hurts enemies, and then older Simba has his clawing moves that he does, which, and then he has like additional moves, and I don't know all the like official terminology, but there's like a move where you can kind of jump on a character, and it kind of does this like mauling animation, and it seems to do more damage. And then there's the trick of where you can actually, once a Panther or Scar gets tired, you can throw them over you.
I noticed I was doing that on accident, and I didn't really know why. Sometimes it did it, and sometimes it didn't.
Correct. Yeah, it's super weird. You have to do it at the right time where the enemy is like tired, and then you have to do like a slash jump, like bump, kind of at like not the same time, but almost the same time.
Oh, okay.
But if you don't master that move, you can't beat Scar at the end. You literally have to throw him off the platform to finish the game.
Yeah.
And I knew that was what it was. Like I knew that I had to do that at the end. Because I remember my brother telling me a few years ago he played through it and could not figure out how to beat Scar. He's just sitting there slashing at him, and they just like could not beat him. So I knew, I was like, I better figure this out. And then throughout the game, just like could not figure it out. And then eventually I just had to look online to figure out how to do it. But they don't really explain it to you. It is in the manual, I think, along with some of the other kind of moves. But I don't know. It's just...
I don't think I realized young Simba could roll.
Right. Yeah. So there's like a lot of other moves where they just don't really explain it to you. And I don't know. At the beginning, right. Maybe at the beginning of the Scar level, it'll be like, toss Scar off the cliff or something, just to let people know. I don't know. My brother, who's a grown man, like could not figure it out just because he didn't know that certain combination was what, made Simba do that thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I chalk that up as kind of poor game design, but I don't know. It was a different time, and so maybe I'm just...
No, I think that's something that they've learned over the years, is that you cannot expect your players to always read every page of the manual. Or in this day and age, there is no more manual. But like the game should be telling you or showing you or teaching you, or just have like a pause menu with the button layout, or something to explain to you what needs to be done. Like you said, adding that hint, just like roar at monkeys, throw Scar off the cliff, or what, some more poetic way to say that. But
press this to roll, like
or
throw that in,
or on
randomly.
each time you get a death, have a new quick hint, which is pretty common in games. And you die a lot in this one, so they should have gotten through all of them.
Plenty of hints.
So I agree. I think that was just sort of the not quite the infancy of game design, but it was still early enough that they hadn't really mastered that. I feel like that's not as big of an issue today, especially with games by big studios. Like Westwood was a pretty well-known studio.
Right.
Although maybe not in 94. It was kind of around the same time Command & Conquer came out. It might have even been before.
So in this game, there are some collectibles, things that you can find, as with most, platformers. So, real quickly, I'm not even going to look at a list. I'm just going to try to kind of remember them off the top of my head. But the big one being bugs. You collect a lot of bugs, and they have different designs. But once again, you could argue they don't really give you like any kind of indication of what they do, and so you kind of have to memorize, the blue one does this, or this one, I don't know. So most of them give you health. Some of them are you collect to expand your meter, be it your health or your roar. There is, I think the blue one is the one that you need to get in order to unlock the bonus stage at the end of the level.
Okay.
And those ones are all Timon and Pumbaa based. There's one where Timon is dropping bugs down and you're Pumbaa and you have to catch them. And then there's one where you're Timon and you're running through this kind of platforming level, collecting bugs without trying to hit the bad bugs, because then you lose. And you get extra continues and health from doing those mini games. And then the other two things are extra lives and continues. And the continues are like this kind of circular image thing. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff?
Yeah, it's like a sun, isn't it?
Right. Well, I figured out what it's actually the circle of life.
Oh, it rules us all.
Yeah, and it's because I looked in the manual of the Game Gear one, because that's the only one I have, and it was referred to as the circle of life.
Okay, that's actually pretty clever.
Yeah, I was like, okay,
nice.
if we had to come up with a graphic for what the circle of life looks like, I could see how that would.
Yeah.
That could be it. So anyway, I think that's all of the collectibles, if I remember correctly.
Sounds right to me.
Most of them. So yeah, you're looking through looking at those throughout. The rest of the gameplay mechanics we can kind of hit as we go through each level. Sometimes we go through level by level in the show, sometimes we don't. I think with a game like this, it makes sense to kind of hit on them and share any thoughts we have. But I don't know, any other gameplay mechanics or things maybe we haven't hit on?
No, I not anything major beyond kind of similar to what we've discussed.
Cool. Next up is the story. Not really a lot we need to hit on here. We kind of already discussed it, but the story is pretty much more or less beat for beat follows the actual movie. Yeah. There's a few levels where it's not in the movie, but the interesting thing I found out, and Jeph, I don't know if you knew this, a lot of the stuff in here that you might look at and be like, I don't really remember this being in the movie, is actually, most of it is cut content that was originally planned to be in the movie.
That's cool. No, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, and so, like for instance, the Hakuna Matata level, I guess you do kind of see that in the movie where they like kind of pull back the drapes and there's like this really serene scenery, but I guess it got cut on the cutting room floor. But at one point there was a lot more experiences of Simba growing up with Timon and Pumbaa and having his own adventures, and eventually they ended up cutting that stuff, and one of the parts of that was them interacting with this like monkey, which ends up being the boss in the level of Hakuna Matata, which I did not like that monkey was in there. I'm like, this is so random. It has nothing to do. Come to find out, like at the time, he was an actual character in the movie.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Later cut. And then the other level is the lava level. Yeah. Where when you're grown up Simba, and I guess that was originally going to be in the movie. It was a part where Simba was returning to Pride Rock, and he had to basically venture through the hyenas kind of territory to get back. And so so even some of the stuff that feels kind of forced is still, I guess, still kind of fits, even if it wasn't actually in the movie. So I kind of respected that, at least, that they and I guess Disney wanted them to like cut that stuff, and the studio was like, if we cut all that, we're like not gonna have much of a game here. Yeah. And so I think they like eventually convinced them to like let them keep that stuff in.
Thank goodness. And then it's kind of ironic, based on the game we covered last time, Ratatouille, where it was like the opposite, where it was like none of it was in the movie.
Right. Seriously. So, like, man.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then like we said, the story all is kind of played out through little vague cutscenes. Maybe not enough story in there. You could argue could use some more, but most people playing this game are familiar with the storyline. So yeah. But I guess if somebody came in and had no idea what the Lion King was about, maybe you could argue they would be a little confused. Like there's no killing off of Mufasa or anything like that. So I can maybe see how you could be confused. But yeah, anyways, it works fine.
It's a good supplemental material, but it wouldn't make any sense on its own.
Right, and like the whole point of this game is not to get like caught up in the storyline. Right. It's more just like, let's just keep moving to the next level. It's a platformer. Yeah. This isn't, All right. So that being said, let's go level by level, and we'll just give any thoughts, any things we want to add, and then we'll wrap up with our final thoughts here. So, excuse me. Starting off is the Pride Lands, which is kind of our opening level. Relatively straightforward, not overly difficult. Just kind of gives you a good kind of introduction to Simba, how he controls all that. Right off the bat, there are multiple different places to check out in this level. It's not the most linear thing, which is cool. Like I like that you can kind of explore. There's different areas, and there's a secret passage at one point, or you can just skip all of it and take the most direct route and kind of get to the end of the level.
Yeah.
So I thought that was neat.
Yeah. And it's I imagine it's sunrise. I mean, it's the background color palette is kind of like the light yellow and light pink. And I think that's to signify that the game is starting. It's, beginning the journey. So I thought that was a nice touch.
Nice.
And then at the end of the level, you kind of get the title scene where you have Simba up on Pride Rock or whatever.
Right.
I thought that was kind of cool. That's one of the few like actual cutscenes.
Totally.
More so than just a stage or whatever.
Right. And then I do appreciate, I saw someone else point this out online, that they there's like a little bit of a boss at the end of the first level, which is a single hyena that you have to fight. And so that's kind of their way of introducing hyenas to you without overwhelming you, because then in level 3 you get thrown in with like 3 or 4 hyenas, and then by the end of the game you're like battling a bunch of them. So it's kind of like a small little introduction. So I like that. That was kind of cool. Next up is Just Can't Wait to Be King. We already really kind of, really dissected this one, but great visuals, great music, really difficult gameplay, unfortunately. The ostrich is really difficult. I do appreciate that they start off by showing you arrows to kind of tell you what's coming, but then the next time you do it, there's no arrows, and so it gets a little more challenging. But if you just memorize it, it's pretty easy. But like I said, the double jumps are really difficult. You have to wait till like the last second to do it, and man, I just died there a lot as a kid. But and then you do the monkey maze, which is kind of annoying, but you have to growl at different monkeys, the pink ones, to change their direction so that they will throw you in the right direction. At one point you have to do that, and then you have to venture backwards over these like logs that are floating in the water, and it's challenging. I died a couple times trying to get across those logs. So but yeah, that was literally the part they added just to slow people down. So but yeah, and that's pretty much that level. It's not really a long level per se, but just like I said, some of the puzzle stuff and the auto scroller stuff just, I think, kind of makes it take a little bit longer. So
yeah.
Any
really
other
quick
things you want to
visual
mention?
Thing? Yeah, on that level it starts out with like kind of a normal color palette, and then as soon as you step off the first platform, it like shifts the colors. I noticed that the Super Nintendo one does it like instantaneously, which I think is kind of cool, where it's like on a beat, and then the Genesis version kind of does a gradual transition, which is pretty cool looking. Just a little different, but a nice touch. I just thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're right. It starts out blue and then it goes orange.
Then it kind of gets into the look of the movie. So
nice.
It's a pretty cool little touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Other than that,
worth
you pretty
mentioning.
much covered, I think, everything about that level. So
Cool. Next up is the Elephant Graveyard. I don't know. A lot of people mention this being like one of the more difficult levels. I don't know if I necessarily thought that. I kind of found it to be on the easier end, I guess. But nonetheless, I guess one of the only like new mechanics it kind of introduces are these cliff hanging, jumping back and forth kind of thing. There's a couple times that let you do that, and then eventually there's like this insta-kill geyser that comes up, and so it's chasing you from below, and you have to speed your way up. There's some new bad guys. There's some vultures that fly around, but mostly hyenas and stuff otherwise. The vultures have a really cool kill animation where they lose all their feathers. It's kind of awesome. Cool use of bones in this one. Like a lot of pits that you're jumping over have like, spiky bones below, and so you have to avoid those or whatever. But I don't know. I didn't have a ton of difficulty with this level. There is one thing at the very end where there's 2 vultures, and then you have to jump across the giant elephant skull. And if you don't execute it properly, you literally fall down to the beginning of the level.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't know if I've ever done it because it's not like a terribly difficult jump, but maybe if you got bested by the vulture, I could see it being difficult. But I thought that was interesting. Like, man, that's evil.
Yeah.
But, one thing this game does a lot, and it was kind of annoying, is you can't really see what's coming next sometimes. Like, thankfully they added the ability where you can hold up or down to, change the camera view so that you can see what's above you or below you.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Get with it, Jeph.
Jeez. Gotta push my buttons.
Yeah. So you can do that, and you can at least see what's below you before you jump off and fall into something you're not supposed to. But I don't know. I guess people might have different opinions, but I feel like a good game designer kind of gives you an idea of like where you're supposed to head, and you're not just
blind jumps to the worst. Yeah.
Right. So
cool.
Next up is the Stampede, which is the level where the camera's kind of facing at Simba and these what are these? Are they wildebeests
these
or
are
water
wildebeest.
buffalo?
Yeah, they call them wildebeest.
I prefer water buffalo, but
well, you should write a letter to the Walt Disney Company and let them know.
Definitely. So they kind of come at you from behind with their trampling feet, and then periodically these rocks will get in your way, and so you're doing a mixture of getting out of the way left to right, and then jumping over things as they come at you.
Yeah.
Jeph, what do you think about this level, Jeph?
Well, first off, it's a very impressive technically, how do I want to say this? It's a technically impressive level. How about that?
There you go.
It's a really cool graphical effect. I mean, we have seen similar things in other games, but it is interesting to note that there's like, this one's in widescreen or whatever. It has like black bars at the top and bottom, which is probably just to get the frame rate to stay up. I'm sure doing the full screen would have been too much for either system, especially the Genesis to handle. So it's interesting. But as far as like the mechanics of it, like dodge left and right and jump over rocks or avoid rocks or whatever, it's fine. It's not my favorite type of gameplay because, if you mess up just one too many times, then you have to start the whole thing over or whatever.
Right.
I played it with invincibility on, and that made it much more bearable. So
definitely.
And it's doesn't seem to have like a instant kill. Like one of the biggest problems I had with the Mickey one we did was like if you trip too many times, the thing behind you caught up, whatever that was, giant apple. Moose, that's it. But yeah, if you trip too many times, the moose gets you, then you start over. Whereas this one, it's like you can keep tripping, and as long as you've got infinite health on, you'll get to the end eventually.
Right.
Which a little more forgiving. Amazingly, because this one, I would have thought the opposite, but
right.
I would have thought the herd catching up to you would have been like a threat and a looming ticking time bomb, but it's not. It's just survive.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up Mickey Mania because I actually just pulled it up just thinking about other games that use the effect. And I think The Lion King does it even a little bit better because Mickey's, it feels like you're on a giant cylinder wheel. And so it's a little more jarring to look at, but I feel like the Lion King one, it just kind of keeps it on a flat plane. And so
agreed.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They both kind of do different effects, but they both work.
Yep.
So. All right. Following that is Simba's Exile, which I kind of briefly mentioned. It's another level similar to the first level in that you're kind of moving left to right. On this one, you're kind of starting at the top and working your way more or less down to the bottom. There's lots of thorns everywhere. This is kind of supposed to be, the area right before Simba jumps into the giant thorn patch to get away. But this is where they introduce that annoying let's drop a rock on your head. So if you are hanging from a ledge for a second and then you pull yourself up, it's just enough time for a rock to spawn like right above you and just hurt you almost immediately.
So annoying.
So it's a little annoying, this level also has a lot of porcupines, which I thought was ridiculous.
Right.
Until later on, come to find out you can roll into porcupines.
Oh, I thought you had to roar at them and then jump.
You
on
can roar at them, but then apparently you can also roll at them from the front.
That's good to know.
Yes, I'm with
But
you.
again, I didn't know that you could roll, so it didn't help
Right.
me any.
So that makes it a lot easier because at one point there's like 5 or 6 porcupines back to back, and I'm like, there's no way I can roar at all these things.
Right.
And so it just felt like bad gameplay. But
Mm-hmm.
once I realized that, I'm like, oh, okay, it's not as bad. But it's definitely an easier level. I think that's kind of the relief coming out of the Stampede level. So
cool.
Following that is Hakuna Matata. This is it's kind of puzzly. I think there's kind of some alternate ways you can go through this level. It's a little more open.
Mm-hmm.
There's like some water slides that you can go different routes with to get where you're going. This is where the enemies got a little ridiculous, in my opinion. There's a spider and a frog.
Yeah.
The spiders are like teeny tiny, so they're hard to see.
Mm-hmm. They're fast.
And then, they're very fast. I don't feel like they have really predictable.
And they jump between platforms and stuff. And
It's
tough timing on.
And then the frogs have projectiles that they spit at you, and it's just a whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the water slides are fine or whatever, and then I'm looking at that part you were talking about where you have to climb under that ledge with the
with like the multiple rock jump.
That part I definitely.
Tricky.
Thankfully, it's not a death below thing. They let you redo it, but it's still frustrating.
Mm-hmm. It's just time consuming.
Yeah.
Because it's slow to drag you back down, and then you have to go up 3 rocks and then start doing your jump again.
Yeah, they definitely still give you a little bit of punishment. So then you finally get to the really annoying waterfall, in my opinion. Makes me think of Donkey Kong Country 3, only Donkey Kong Country 3 does it way better.
Yeah.
Yeah. But bad. Then after you get to that, you eventually make your way to the boss of the level, which is the gorilla that I originally thought was super random and made no sense. His fight's not terribly difficult if you kind of learn his attack pattern, because he like swats you away if you attack at the wrong time, and you just kind of have to dodge these, I believe they're coconuts he's throwing at you, and then jump at the right attack at the right time, and he keeps moving his way up, and then eventually at the end he falls to his demise. So oof da. So that is the final Simba Cub level, and then we grow up and we are on to Simba's Destiny. I'm trying to think where this sits in the plot. Is this him? Oh, this is after no, because he doesn't talk to. Oh, he's searching out his dad in this part. Because at the very end of the level, he
does see his kind of cloud ghost.
His dad's in the sky, and he says something.
It's the Force Ghost. Darth Vader.
This is the level that introduces, obviously, because first level with the Jaguar, Bobcat, whatever they are. So you have to fight them off, and there's certain parts of this level where you get stopped, and you have to defeat multiple of them in order to progress. And then Rafiki shows up and like clears the way for you.
Oh yeah, that was really annoying because I thought I was doing something wrong.
Right.
I thought it was like maybe there's just infinite Jaguars. I need to go back or something. Like I went back and forth there for a while.
Right, because it just looks like a bad spawn job, doesn't it?
You're
That's
like, exactly what it looks like. Because it's just one at a time, and then as soon as one dies, another one just appears, sort of behind the bushes, but like you just see it pop into existence, which is super dumb.
Right. So that was kind of weird. I did notice when I was watching a speed run of this, speedrunners figured out if you go up to the very first Jaguar, we'll call them, and you get it to the point that you can toss it behind your back, you'll like move through that barrier and you skip the rest of them that you have to fight.
Well, that's convenient.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. And then there's another part in the lava level where you can do the same thing, but you like pass through a wall and you skip like the entire level. It's really cool.
Oh, nice.
So that's pretty much it for this level. Really cool visuals. I like the blues and purples in the background with the trees and stuff. I think that it felt cool. It's neat. There's like vines and stuff that get in your way, and you have to claw through them or whatever. So it's a easier level, but once again, kind of a catch your breath level, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So after that is Be Prepared, which is the lava level I talked about earlier. This one's got some interesting little mechanics to it. There's like a really annoying dripping that comes from the ceiling that are difficult to see coming, so you kind of have to avoid them. Let's see. There's a couple things you have to. There's like geysers you have to avoid that shoot lava out of them, and then you have to. There's a part where you have to go across lava on a log, and there's like bats trying to kill you. I hate when video games have bats. Bats are like never fun.
It's so true. like every game that I can think of that has bats, they're just annoying.
Yes, they never enrich the experience. Like, oh good, I'm glad this game had bats. But then you get to the end of this level and it's kind of stupid. But basically there's the geysers with lava, and then these rocks fall from the sky and try to hurt you, and you just have to dodge them, and you just have to wait.
Just a survival, yeah.
Right, and then eventually all of the things get plugged, and you stand on the last one, and it like rockets you into space. But there's no indication that that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Thankfully, you can't leave the area, so you're kind of stuck. But man, just like pure confusion on my end, and I'm sure everybody else's. Yep. And there doesn't seem to be any way to like speed it up, so you're just kind of holding out and hoping for the best.
Yeah. It's like the worst kind of Mario Maker level.
Right, seriously. Like, who thought of this? Interrupt me if you have anything to add to these.
I didn't play a whole lot of these. I kind of gave each one a run, but
and I don't know the later levels as well either, because I've played bits and pieces of them, but until today I hadn't really fully played through.
Yeah.
Simba's Return is the second to last level, and this one is kind of in the decimated post-apocalyptic Pride Rock area.
Yeah.
You can kind of see in the background it's just bones and nothing. This is a puzzle level, I guess you could say. I mean, not really a puzzle, more like a maze. Bunch of different caves that you can enter, but before you can go in and out, you have to kill off the hyenas in the room in order to progress.
And they will respawn if you return to that area.
I don't like that.
I don't either.
That was so annoying. Like, I'm sure it's not easy for them to like program it that way, but it's like, why do they need to respawn?
Oh, I think it's easy. I think it was a choice to try and make it, last
more difficult.
Bit. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Anyway, I looked up a walkthrough and found there's like an easy route and a harder route.
Excellent.
Which I think you get more like power-ups if you go the harder route or the longer route.
Okay.
But if you just kind of memorize which way to go, it's not terrible. Fighting the hyenas you can do it without losing too much health if you do like this like jump attack on them. They die pretty quick depending on which difficulty you have it on. Right. So other than that, I don't think there's much more to this level. I think that's kind of the main mechanic. There's no boss. I guess at the very end you fight a bunch of hyenas, but
right.
And then that takes us into the final level, which is Pride Rock, which is where you fight Scar. You battle him on 3 different occasions. You start off immediately battling him, and then he runs off. You do some platforming, fight a couple hyenas, and then he shows back up. You fight him off again until you get him to the very top of Pride Rock. I can't really speak to the difficulty of the battle because I played this on infinite health, so I'm not entirely sure how difficult he is per se. But I did notice there's certain attacks that do more damage that make it quicker, so you don't have to fight him as long. But the platform itself isn't terribly difficult in this level. But visually, this is a really cool level. There's some lightning in it that catches different platforms on fire, so you have to kind of be careful about that. But I never felt like it was like super like aggressive lightning that like hits you. Right. It more just makes different areas difficult to traverse because there's fire on it. But yeah, great visuals. Like a lot of the rocks and stuff that you're on have like a red glow on the bottom.
It's like flames coming up from the bottom of the screen, which looks pretty cool.
Yeah, those flames do look really cool. Like at one point I was playing and I just started staring at them and I was like, I need to focus. But yeah, just visually a neat level, and it felt pretty intense. I kept like thinking that the flames were going to like eventually catch up below me or something, Donkey Kong style. But thankfully, it's just more of a visual aesthetic to just kind of make it feel intense. But yeah, and then like I said, you get up to the top and you have to eventually figure out that you got to throw Scar off the side, and so you kind of have to position yourself in a way that you can kind of have your back to the edge, but then get him exhausted and then throw him off the side, and then you've beaten the game.
Most excellent.
Yes. And then you get a little cutscene of Simba doing his little roar on Pride Rock, and then the credits roll and it's over. That's it. So that is Lion King in a nutshell. Thanks for sitting through that. I don't know. Some of these levels are good, but I noticed as we got to the end of it, we'd already kind of mostly said what we said about them. But
that's okay.
What are you gonna do? All right, let's go ahead and do our final thoughts, and we will get on out of here. Jeph, what are you thinking?
So this is a great movie tie-in game, one of the best ones of the 90s for sure. It does have some design issues as far as not teaching you all the moves in game, and a little unforgiving. Like if you fall off a ledge into a open pit, it starts you over really far back, especially if you haven't gotten like a checkpoint, rather than like taking off a hit point and putting you back up on the ledge to try to jump again. Things like that you might see more nowadays. But other than that, it's got really good production values as far as graphics, sound. The gameplay is pretty good. Difficulty is a pain. It's unfortunate. Product of its time, but if you can get through that, and if you've got the time to sink into it and really learn it, it's not the worst. It never feels, well, it does feel unfair at first, but like it's doable. It's not like it's bad gameplay and that's why you can't finish it. But overall, I would recommend it to anybody who likes The Lion King, or just Disney video games in general. I think this is one of, like we said, the quintessential definitive type Disney video game adaptations, and it's an interesting snapshot into what games like this were like in the mid 90s. So I recommend it.
Nice. For me, I love this game. Lots of nostalgia and good memories behind it. Great music, visually a really good looking game for its time. I don't know. The difficulty I have mixed feelings about. I think they could have made easier and then left the challenge in for medium and hard, because I feel like on easy it's not, the challenge is way higher than what easy should be.
Agreed.
And on easy you get 8 lives, and then after that you get like multiple continues, and if you find some of them, like I think one time I died and I had 4 more continues, so 4 times 8, do the math, that's a lot of times to die and stuff. But it's definitely one of those games you would have to play over and over to learn things, get to know stuff, know where there are some secrets, areas you can find and things you can do to make your experience easier. But I think I just would like to have seen it be a little more approachable for a younger audience, especially since I was the younger audience at the time. And I don't need Blockbuster and or Disney thinking, if we don't make this hard, then these kids aren't going to buy my game. Like, I'm a kid, dude. Like, I'm going to buy the game because it's Lion King and I think it's awesome. Like, even if I can play through the game in one sitting, that doesn't mean I'm going to be like, oh, don't need this game anymore. And I know that's not everybody. Some people might be that way, but I don't know. I just think Aladdin had a better difficulty to it. I felt like it was a little more in line with where this should have been, but wasn't. But regardless, I still enjoy it. And now that I've played some of the later levels, and I think I've got a little bit better understanding of how some of these later levels work, I could see if I continued, messing with this one, that I could maybe get through it eventually without having to have like unlimited health on. But I think I would encourage anybody who might try this for the first time, it might be worth just putting that on, because even with that, you're still going to die a lot, and you're still going to end up using continues, even if you have infinite health, because like we said, there's lots of instant death and stuff out there. But regardless, I think it's a great game. I think it's a good platformer. It might not have like the best physics or whatever at certain points, but that being said, I still think it holds up well. I don't think it's like aged poorly or anything. I think it still plays as good as it did back in 1995. Yeah, so definitely recommend. And super good quality despite the high difficulty. So highly recommend it.
Excellent.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week, guys. If you haven't already, if you're on Twitter, give us a follow. We're at mouse_bytes. We usually post as soon as we have a new episode live. You can find it there with links and stuff, or you can go straight to our website at www.thenintendovillage.com. For there you can find links to all of our episodes that we've done previously, as well as some other great shows, reviews, and other content, all Nintendo based. Our episodes are also on the Nintendo Village YouTube page, so if you want to watch me struggle through games like the one we covered today, you can go there and listen to this episode while watching gameplay footage. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. Guys, thanks again, and join us next episode as we're going to cover another awesome Disney game. Looking forward to it. You guys have a great day.
Hakuna Matata, everybody.